I'm truly delighted to be here. I love celebrating the history of women and women's achievements because in my lifetime there have been too few occasions when these types of opportunities were available. I've spent almost my entire career associated with sport, and today I would like to tell you about some of the important things, some of the most important things that I've learned through sport. And I've learned these things through contemplation on the history of sport as it has personally affected me. Let me talk very briefly about why I love sport. I loved it as an athlete for the sheer joy and exhilaration. And it's very, very difficult to adequately describe the feeling to anyone who has not experienced that rush. But enough to say it's a wonderful feeling to which one can become very easily addicted. It was much later in my life that I learned that there are so many other benefits to participating in activity. In fact, today, I don't think we even realize fully all the positive consequences to a woman's health. Let me cite just a few. Participation is believed to decrease blood pressure and cholesterol, to lower the risk for obesity, coronary heart disease, and osteoporosis, proven by research. Recent research has also noted that 1 to 3 hours of exercise a week may bring up to 30% reduction in the risk of breast cancer, and 4 or more hours of exercise per week can reduce that risk almost by 60%. 3 to 4 hours, 60%. You know that women now outlive men by quite a few years. So, if we ever really did take great care of ourselves, we'd be indestructible. Add to these benefits that through activity, there is often the development of critical skills that contribute directly to success in life generally. For example, you've all heard these things: goal setting, teamwork, the pursuit of excellence, and other achievement-oriented behaviors that really are essential for success in the workplace. But addition, many female athletes display an assuredness, a high level of self-esteem, and a spirit of confidence in everything that they do as they progress through life. Most athletes that I've known are strong, competent, active, assertive, and successful women. And that is the real power of sport. Since I started teaching and coaching over 45 years ago, I have seen innumerable young women totally transformed through sport and activity. I chose my career because I love sport. But what gave me the passion to continue to fight for equal opportunities was the unshakable belief that a sport experience can truly empower a woman, perhaps better than any other experience. Self-confidence, self-esteem, pride, competence, assertiveness, and on top of all that, physical skill, power, and strength. Now that is empowerment.
Hello, everyone. Many thanks to Derek Grant of the Black Hawk Pipes and Drums for that incredibly expressive processional. Derek isn't related to Christine, but he was born just a few miles from where Chris grew up in Scotland. I'm Liz Ullman, and I am humbled to be among this group of family, friends, and colleagues who are here to honor the life and legacy of Dr. Christine H.B. Grant. I met Dr. Grant just 3 months after Title IX was passed in 1972, 50 years ago. I was a field hockey player and was among the first women to enjoy actual intercollegiate status. Of course, back then, it mostly meant that we didn't have to share uniforms with the volleyball team. But still, it was an important first step, and we knew it was historic. In the decades of my association with Christine, I knew her as a coach, an instructor, a professor, a mentor, and a colleague. I know many of you here were equally inspired by her. But her love for field hockey put those of us who played that sport in a separate and an especially devoted category. We were certain that the HB in her name stood for hockey ball. Many of you know that Chris Grant came to Iowa in 1969. Those were heady times, demanding revolution in so many aspects of our society. And leading the revolution for gender equity in sport was Chris Grant, and of course her colleagues and lifelong friends, Bonnie Slatton and Peg Burke. It was a time of change and upheaval, Vietnam, civil rights, and what was then called Women's Lib. There was a political feminist group here in Iowa City that published a manifesto under the title that had been coined by Sojourner Truth a century earlier. It was called Ain't I a Woman? And that was some call to action. Incidentally, it had the same acronym as another effort demanding equality, and that was the AIAW, the Association for Intercollegiate Athletics for Women. The people who will be speaking here today likely have at least one thing in common. They were all the first woman to just fill in the blank. With Chris's help, I was one of the first women to work in college sports information. But Christine was the very first of the first. I remember joining her at a Big Ten Athletic Directors Conference in 1974 at their headquarters just outside Chicago. This was a group who knew each other really well. They traveled together, their teams competed against each other, they were golfing buddies, they were likely drinking buddies, and of course they were all men. Chris shows up at this conference in a gorgeous suede pantsuit. Oh my God, what a power statement. And she gets what can only be described as a somewhat tepid reception. But as all of you know, Chris could be both charming and disarming. After she made her case for the legal necessity for universities to support women's athletics, one AD grumbled that he only liked his women in the prone position. Oh, the air went out of the room, and everybody looked at Chris. She folded her arms, she leaned back in her chair, and she said, "Don't you mean supine?" The room exploded in laughter, and she was in. That was the moment. Christine lived what she taught. Her lessons have informed my own life and my career. Lessons like, we deserve to be taken seriously, and in turn, we must take ourselves seriously. And another, if we didn't win, but we did what we came to do, then we also did not lose. And her most enduring lesson, always strive for excellence. I am so glad to have known her, and so sad that she is gone. But she will live on because of her vast accomplishments and her tremendous far-reaching influence. Our first speaker today is the 22nd president of this university that is 175 years old. 20 years ago, Iowa was the first school in the Big Ten to name a woman as president, This year, 5 schools in our conference are headed by women. With a background in communications and journalism, Barbara Wilson, I'm sure, has her own stories about being among the first in her profession. I'm delighted to welcome President Barbara Wilson.
Thank you, Liz. I'm really delighted to be here, and I especially want to welcome the family of Christine Grant. We're so pleased that you're here. We know many of you have traveled. It's very special for us to have you here, so thank you very much. And thanks, too, for all of you who have shown up today on a Sunday afternoon when it's sunny and beautiful outside and you've decided to come indoors into Carver to spend some time thinking about and honoring a great woman from the University of Iowa. Dr. Grant had an enormous impact on our campus, as well as on women's sports and gender equity nationally. The University of Iowa is very grateful that this true pioneer enhanced our institution and indeed our society. Not only was she a legendary leader on our campus, but she was an Iowa alum, something we're also very proud of. She received her bachelor's degree in physical education in 1969, her master's in 1970, and a PhD in sports administration in 1974. We were fortunate to benefit from her talent in implementing Title IX on our campus, as well as her expertise and advocacy for gender equity throughout her career and after her retirement. Under Dr. Grant's leadership as Women's Athletic Director, Hawkeye programs soared. We won 27 Big Ten championships during her time in that role, 27. This included the Iowa women's basketball team advancing to the 1993 NCAA Final Four. It included the Iowa field hockey winning the NCAA championship game in 1986, and then having a total of 12 Final Four appearances. Just think about that. Her national influence is incomparable. She was a founding member of the Association of Intercollegiate Athletics for Women, serving also as its president. She was a board of directors member and president of the National Association of Collegiate Women Athletic Administrators. She was a leader on many NCAA and Big Ten committees and initiatives. Today, female student athletes across our campus, and I would argue throughout the country, fully enjoy athletic competition and an excellent education thanks to Christine's pioneering work and often difficult work in her various roles. The entirety of intercollegiate athletics across campus and this nation is all the better thanks to her legacy. I was really fortunate to be able to meet Christine last November. She invited me to come out to the birdhouse for a special session with her, and I had no idea what to expect. I was honored to be asked, and I went out to the house and sat by her bedside, and true to form, she did not want to talk about herself. She wanted to talk about the University of Iowa, how fabulous it was, how lucky I was to be not the first woman president, not the second woman president, but the third woman president at this fabulous university. Yeah, that's worth clapping for. She told me in no uncertain terms that this was the best institution I could have landed a presidency at, and I think she's right. And she reminded me of the importance of thinking about gender in everything that I do as a leader. And I told her I will do that. I promised her that at that afternoon at her bedside. I'll never forget that moment. I felt honored to be there, and I have to tell you, it was probably one of the signature events of my first year as president. So thanks to Christine Grant, to everything she stood for, to everything she fought for, to everything that she leaves us here at the University of Iowa. Thank you.
It's amazing to see what has happened to women's athletics in the 50 years since Chris Grant essentially invented it. The very first paid coach for Iowa women's athletics was hired in 1974. That was Lark Birdsong, who coached basketball. Lark came into an Iowa program that didn't have a dedicated court to play on. She had to schedule around recreational leagues in the field house. There were no locker rooms, no scholarships, and almost no money for recruiting. There was absolutely no media interest, and I say that as a former sports information director. Lark took it all in stride. In fact, she had such a low-key approach to coaching that it took her 5 years to earn her first technical foul. After her college career, Lark went on to manage a professional women's basketball team. And with regard to Hawkeye basketball, Lark got the ball rolling. I'd like to welcome Lark Birdsong.
Thank you, Liz, and the folks who organized the memorial. The people of Iowa are so deep in my heart today, and I thank you for having me with you today. Mostly, we were friends. I knew Christine for over 45 years, and it's from a friend's perspective that I share a few stories of Christine H.B. Grant with you today. Above all, Christine was a Scot. Born in Scotland to her mom and pop, Jean and Donald, she had 2 brothers, Alec and Hugh, with Christine in the middle. Alec has passed, and Hugh and his partner are in Scotland today, and Lisa, Donald, Stephanie, and their families, and Andrea are here today with us. They are her nieces and nephews. Her other nephew, Christopher, is in Scotland. Christine's American family was Peggy Burke and Bonnie Slatton, and many of Peggy Burke's and Bonnie Slatton's family are here today as well. Now, about that HB that Liz mentioned, contrary to what she said, the real meaning behind HB was revealed by one of my players. It stood for honey bun. My daughter Nicole and I stayed with Mom and Pop in Scotland in the mid-'80s. We had a wonderful visit with them and Hugh and his family. During our visit, I told Hugh, I love his accent. He laughed at me and said, over here, my dear, it is you who has the accent. Alec, Hugh, and Christine were pranksters, regularly outdoing one another. In one story, Alec was bringing his soon-to-be fiancé and wife home to meet the family. He told the family in no uncertain terms, she does not speak a word of English. You better brush up on your German. True to form, she did. The day came, she was in a tizzy as the story goes. She ran to the door, she threw the door open, ready to greet Gudrun in perfect German, when Gudrun says, hello, you must be Christine. She had been pranked. Jean and Donald encouraged Alec, Christine, and Hugh to express opinions freely. Many lively discussions took place. The civil discourse continued in America when Hugh visited with Peggy Burke and many others who are smiling right now, remembering these civil conversations with Christine. The Grant family enjoyed humble beginnings, being born and growing up in a building that housed 8 other families. Christine was the only girl, and she regularly competed with 8 boys in the sports center created in the backyard. As young kids, Christine, Alec, and Hugh and the other boys would regularly scale a 10-foot telephone post with a guide wire so they could get to Grange Elementary School earlier. After Grange, Christine went to Boness Academy and fell in love with field hockey, which became her favorite sport. Hugh thinks it must have made her laugh in later years to recall the terrain on which she played on during her teenage years. The hockey pitch was a rough field, full of divots and on a slope, maybe a little like hockey was for Iowa's early days. Hugh's partner, Margaret, knew Christine at Boness, and Margaret was a beginner, and Christine had achieved the Queen's Guide Award. The youngsters waited on Christine's every word, and after she left Dunfermline College, Christine went back to help with camps. Some important skills she taught the kids, in addition to camping, were how to find the nearest fish and chip market, and, importantly, how to organize a safe all-night, overnight hike and finish up at the Aberdeen Fish Market at 7 a.m. in the morning. After Boness Academy, she went to Dunfermline College. A place had become available earlier than had planned, and this took Mom and Pop a bit by surprise because they suddenly had to come up with the unexpected costs. Friends, family, and one of Christine's teachers supported her so she could take her place at college. Later in life, Christine set up a fund in the name of her Mom and Pop to help the students at Grant Elementary School in North Liberty, Iowa. At the end of her coursework, Christine taught for 5 years in Scotland. She met Barbara Hart, who encouraged her to move to Vancouver to coach the Canadian field hockey team. As Hugh says, the rest is history. While I was a coach at Iowa, we started looking at Iowa basketball arenas to get ideas for the soon-to-be-built Carver Hawkeye Arena. Christine Bumploot and I flew in to visit several arenas. And the airplane was a small plane from the University of Iowa, and we were going over the Grand Canyon, and the pilot looked back and gleefully said, "Would you like to go into the canyon?" All of us did, but Christine. She had white knuckle grip in her seat, closed her eyes, and made it through the canyon. Flying was not her favorite thing. Peg tells of a time when she was gone and Christine hired a crew to pick up some free bricks and pavers after the Ira River flooded to build a surprise garden bed for her. When Bonnie, Christine, and Peg went to Coronado Island and Christine saw the bridge that she would travel over from San Diego, Christine said, "I'm not going over that bridge." Airplanes and heights were still not her favorite thing. Bonnie said she did make it over the bridge. Christine rescued dogs, and her last one was Pepper, who had been left outside for 4 years in the cold Iowa winters and hot summers. Pepper never had a cold day again once Christine took her into her home in love. Now, this is a good one. Christine lived on Lake McBride and had a dock and a boat. On more than one occasion, on a bright sunny day, she'd go down to the dock to go boating, only to find no boat. It had sunk to the bottom again. After retiring, Christine resumed piano lessons. I have one video of her playing Wish Upon a Star that's so perfect to listen to now. We knew each other's moms, and when I lost my mom last year, we spoke about how the missing of our moms never stops. When I came to Iowa to participate in the Pigman Triathlon, Christine, Peg, and Bon were there cheering me on. They supported me whether my life was in transition or settled. In April 2021, I was out to help Christine. Some UFI folks wondered if she would like to record a video now for the 2023 reunion. Christine said she wanted to think about it. In July, when I returned, I asked about the video, and she thought about it, and she says, "No, I think I've done enough." Proud of the accomplishments for equality, Christine was also disappointed in the lack of equality, with glaring examples still occurring 50 years later. With Christine in mind, I asked people in positions of decisions, please open to what it feels like if you were not being treated equally, and provide the resources, policies, words, images, and support to make a change to equality. Equality does not subtract, it adds. In Christine's last years, when her body failed her, she had a tremendous amount of perseverance and love for life. She was engaged and wanted to live, even being confined. With her body failing her, she took care of people, gave love, advice, and hope to many while confined to her bed, And yes, she still provided civil discourse. Christine's fuel for life was her Scottish family, Peggy Burke and Bonnie Slatton. Bonnie and Peg, you were her family for over 50 years. For all those years, you three had fun, traveled together, advocated for equality, kept up the civil conversations, and gave unwavering love and support to each other. Christine loved you too dearly and was eternally grateful to you. To the Grants, Christine loved you immensely. She so enjoyed your many visits, calls, and the love you gave her. She was so proud of all of you. Several people helped Christine in many ways over the years. She treasured your calls, cards, conversation meals, and visits. With Christine's passing, it's not our inheritance of what Christine, Peg, Bonnie, and others have accomplished to give women and girls opportunities that we celebrate today. That is their gift to us. Rather, our inheritance is in what remains to be done. That is our mandate for now and in the future until equality is achieved. Let's fill the emptiness Christine's passing has left us with acts of equality and gratitude for those who are still here. Thank you, my dear great Scott Christine, all the Grants, Peg and Bonnie, for what you have given me. My gratitude, love, and respect for all of you is deep and eternal. In saying goodbye to Christy, I paraphrase Winnie the Pooh. How lucky am I to have someone I know and love who is so hard to say goodbye to. I'm delighted to introduce Judith Davidson. Judith was Iowa's field hockey coach from 1978 to 1987, and she built the foundation for our field hockey program's excellence today. With a perfect 10 national championships appearances, 7 Big Ten championships, and 1 NCAA title in her 10 years at Iowa. Judith, I'm delighted to welcome you.
Hello, everyone. Normally, I would love to be in Iowa City, but not for this reason. Like so many of you, I have Chris to thank for bringing me to the University of Iowa. And the following is true. I was finishing my PhD studies at the University of Massachusetts, preparing to be a full-time academic and giving up coaching field hockey. I had just returned to UMass from a North American Society for Sport History conference in Banff, Canada, where I'd had several conversations with someone named Chris Trent. This is true. While I was in my office back at UMass, I was told there was a call for me from a Christine Grant. I was certain they misunderstood, and it was Chris Trent calling. And as the saying goes, the rest is history. To be perfectly honest, Chris was in desperate need of a field hockey coach. She would have hired anyone. I did not plan to continue coaching, but her vision for the women's athletics program was so persuasive that I agreed to visit. And immediately following our conversation, I looked at a map to see exactly where Iowa was. I feel extraordinarily fortunate to have been here during what I would call our halcyon days, when under Christine's leadership, our entire program began to grow. Here's an example. You've already heard this, but during my first year, we shared warm-up suits with the track team. I don't believe any of the men's team shared uniforms with each other. Soon, not only did we have our own warm-ups, but they were also appropriate for the late, cold fall weather in Iowa. I will also never forget when my colleague and dear friend Diane DeMarco said she needed footies for the gymnastics team. Chris wanted all the coaches to vote on whether or not we would fund them. Chris, we said, if Diane says she needs footies, she needs footies. Sometimes it was a struggle, but we were always moving forward. Then there was our home field, the lawn in front of the student union. Yes, that's right. My favorite practicing there was the week before homecoming, when the students held a Bash the Car event that happened to occur during our practice. Remember that? Just imagine what semi-sober undergraduates can do with a sledgehammer and an old car destined for destruction. And then there was the condition of the field. Chris was not pleased when I complained to then Vice President Casey Mahon about potential danger to the players due to an inadequate playing surface. Soon after that, we were practicing and competing in Kinnick Stadium, which at the time had an artificial turf field. Later, we also gained access to the football indoor practice facility. Even though we were always subject to football schedule, it was nevertheless a major improvement, and I know Chris was behind our being able to use the artificial turf fields, which makes our sport so very much better. Facilities are one thing, but what really helped our program grow was the full complement of athletic scholarships, which enabled us to bring outstanding young women to Iowa. They are the ones who made the program, and it was Christine's leadership which provided access to scholarship resources. I am quite sure that during my time at Iowa, not only were we in the vanguard of providing field hockey scholarships to female athletes, but we led the rest of the country in providing scholarships for all women's sports, all due to Chris's advocacy for female athletes. In closing, I am amazed and probably somewhat envious of the current facilities, the support, the chartered flights to distant competition, not to mention coaching salaries. But I wouldn't change 1 minute of my time here, and I thank Chris not only for bringing me to Iowa, but also for providing me the opportunity to participate in the vanguard of women's intercollegiate sport in the United States. The continued success of the Iowa women's athletics teams is certainly a tribute to Christine's legacy. As an historian of sport, I can confidently say none of it would have happened without Christine Grant and her passion for building this program. So I thank you, Christine Grant, as well as Bonnie Slatton and Peg Burke, for leading a movement that continues to grow, not only here in Iowa and the United States, but worldwide. I personally am so fortunate to have been a small part of this seismic change. No longer will girls and women be content with sitting on the sidelines, be it the sidelines of a playing field or the sidelines of society. And we will never go back. It was your leadership that helped change the world. Thank you, Chris. May your legacy here live forever. Thank you, Iowa, for supporting Christine's vision. Go Hawks. Now I'd like to, we have a short video about Grant Elementary School and Jamie Brand. Jamie was a basketball letter winner for head coach Lisa Bluter from 2010 to 2013, and is now the women's basketball coach for Liberty High School and a 5th grade teacher at Christine Grant Elementary School, both in the Iowa City Community School District. Please welcome Jamie Brand.
Hi. As I was introduced, my name is Jamie Brandt. Some of you may recognize me a little more by Jamie Printy. That was my maiden name when I was here at the university. First of all, I would just like to thank everyone for allowing me today to speak and share my thoughts on Dr. Christine Grant. When I think about my own life and how grateful I am for the opportunities that I have been given, Dr. Christine Grant's name comes to my mind immediately. Growing up, I always dreamed of playing basketball at the University of Iowa. I lived and breathed basketball, black and gold. Dr. Grant was the reason that I was able to live out that dream. The way that she fought for women's sports, not only at our university, but as a whole, was remarkable. I was able to have an impact on younger kids, meet the best teammates, and play for the future Hall of Fame coach, Coach Bluter, and travel so many places because of Dr. Grant's work with Title IX. I am forever grateful for her knowledge, her fight, and her persistence. I remember the first time I was able to meet Dr. Grant. She came after practice and talked with our team in the locker room. It was a privilege to listen to her speak about her own life and the accomplishments that she had. I also remember our Iowa coaches always talking about women's rights and how blessed we were as a team to get to be able to compete, to get scholarships, and all of the other privileges that we had. The older I get, the more I realize how much Christine Grant did for all of us student athletes, and for that, I'm forever grateful. After my basketball career came to an end, I didn't know exactly what I wanted to do with my life. For a while, I went into medical sales, but I wasn't happy. I then got into coaching, and I felt at home again. I was able to provide opportunities to young athletes that I was fortunate enough to get as a student athlete. I then went back to get my teaching degree. I am currently a 5th grade teacher in North Liberty. I love my job, I love my students, but most importantly, I love the school that I get to work at. I work at Christine Grant Elementary School. I get to work at the building named after one of the most important and influential people that women's athletics has ever had. I get to work at a school named after one of the most hardest working, most positive role models that I have ever had. I get to work at a school and try to have the most positive impact on my students each and every single day while trying to represent what Christine Grant represented for so many of us. She was one of the people that allowed me to dream big, and now I get to help other students and athletes dream big. Thank you, Dr. Christine Grant, for everything that you have done for not only myself, but for the community as a whole. Please direct your attention to the video board for a short video tribute from members of the Iowa Athletics Department, coaches, and staff. Thank you.
I don't know if I have the words to do justice or to accurately describe what Dr. Grant has meant to me and to our Iowa field hockey family. Her impact on my career as a female athlete and coach was transformational. I first met Dr. Grant when I was 17 and being recruited by Iowa. It was a privilege to meet her at that time in my life, and the opportunity to be a student athlete at Iowa under her leadership in the late 90s was life-changing. I feel even luckier to have had her presence, friendship, and guidance during the last 20 years of my coaching career. I wore this sweatshirt today for Dr. Grant because it was her absolute favorite logo, and it represents to so many women the unbelievable pride, history, tradition, and championship culture that she created within women's athletics at Iowa during her 27-year tenure as athletics director. For almost 50 years, each time the Iowa field hockey team ran out onto Grant Field, appropriately named in her honor, Dr. Grant was there. Iowa field hockey would not be what it is today without her, and I know I speak for the countless women who have had the opportunity to play and coach for this program that Dr. Grant's memory deserves nothing less than our endless gratitude. She unquestionably dedicated her career and life to the belief that the world is a better place when women have an equal opportunity to compete at every level and on an equally challenging field upon which to achieve their goals. We will strive to live up to her example of excellence and especially to champion her life's work of creating equal opportunities for girls and women in sport and life. Thank you, Dr. Grant.
Dr. Grant's legacy will be remembered as somebody that has provided opportunity for thousands and thousands of girls and women to enjoy the benefits that come out of participating in sport. And I'm always amazed because Dr. Grant is known on a national level. I mean, she has received awards nationally, and yet sometimes locally we forget about this woman that's an icon in our own community. And that's why I was so excited when they named the Dr. Christine Grant Elementary School in North Liberty, because it kind of brings more attention to her right here in our community. Dr. Grant meant so much to me personally because she obviously hired me to be the coach here at the University of Iowa, but I know she paved the way to give me opportunity to be the head coach here for many years, and just to be a part of the game of women's basketball. She has done so much for all sports, and especially, women's basketball. She's in the Women's Basketball Hall of Fame. She taught me to think in a different way. She taught me to realize inequities that I hadn't seen before. She opened my eyes to some of these issues.
When I made it to state as a high school senior, Dr. Grant was the speaker at the breakfast that year. And I remember being so inspired. And I think I've always been kind of an old soul. I think at the breakfast, a lot of people were probably trying to think about, winning the game, or maybe weren't as focused on the tidbits of Title IX. But I remember just being, so enamored with what Dr. Grant was saying, and I remember introducing myself to her. And then I went on about my way and so forth. But then watching and learning even more about her as my college career unfolded, obviously being at Drake and everything Dr. Grant was doing and had done, and then getting to come over here. My mind flashes back to that moment at Vets Auditorium in Des Moines, which the girls' state tournament in this state has a whole lot of lore. And then meeting the woman who was responsible for so much nationally at that event, and not really knowing how that was all going to intersect later, was really another really neat moment.
One of the great gifts that Dr. Grant gave to the student athletes here on the women's programs at Iowa was the time and dedication she took to picking the best leaders and mentors as head coaches for the women's student athletes at Iowa. She was famous for having a really difficult vetting process when she went through her hiring searches. And it was really important for her to hire the best people to be able to come in here and lead the young women. And I was a beneficiary of having tremendously positive head coaches who impacted my life as a student athlete at Iowa. And so I'm so grateful for her for hiring wonderful men and women that led me throughout my collegiate career. And in addition to being such a giant on the national stage, Dr. Grant was somebody who was personally invested in all of the women's student athletes that were here at the University of Iowa. For me personally, one of my favorite stories is there was a cold winter day in January when she had sent a request for me to join her on a trip to an iClub event in southern Iowa. And I met her and we got in her red sports car and drove about 45 minutes south to visit an iClub function at an Elks Hall. And she spoke to me about Iowa and asked about my personal experience and my academic areas of studying on the drive down. And we got out of the car and she told me just to be natural and go ahead and speak and tell my story to the donors who were at the iClub function. And we had a wonderful evening together. And it's one of the memories that I always treasure about her is that she gave opportunities to young women to also be involved and to do public speaking and to tell their stories. She also always was invested in my career, and she wrote my letter of recommendation to an internship at the White House. She wrote my letter of recommendation to law school. She took time and wanted to be involved in my successes and wanted to advocate for me in a way that extended beyond my experience here as a women's tennis player.
Dr. Grant's accomplishments are well documented, but maybe the greatest tribute that can be paid to her is seen through the thousands of lives upon which she had an incredible impact. The respect and admiration of all those people with whom she came in contact is, to me, maybe the greatest trait that I can associate or think of as it relates to Dr. Grant. So saddened for the loss of a great leader, but it does give us a chance to really celebrate a life that accomplished so much and had a positive impact on so many people. We're going to miss her, but certainly respect and admire all that she did during her lifetime.
In 31 years as head coach, Gail Blevins compiled an amazing win-loss record. At the time of her retirement, Gail was the second winningest coach in NCAA Division I history. She never had a losing season, working at both Iowa and Indiana universities. Gail's name appears in 3 different halls of fame: the National Fast Pitch Coaches Association Hall of Fame, the Indiana University Hall of Fame, and she was inducted into the Iowa Athletics Hall of Fame in 2016. Those acknowledgments speak to the immense and lasting effect Gail had on the hundreds of athletes she worked with, athletes who embraced the challenge of competing at the highest level and the privilege of being coached by one of the very best. Gail worked with Christine Grant for 22 years.
Thank you, Liz. First, to Christine's family, many of whom are present here today. Thank you for sharing Christine with all of us. I know she made a huge sacrifice being so far away from Scotland, yet she did so knowing she could make a huge difference in the lives of girls and women across the U.S. Christine shared stories of her family with many of us. I can remember one time talking about her mother continuing to live in her 2-story home because climbing the stairs was the best way to stay in good shape. Those around Christine know she never lost her Scottish accent. In fact, Vivian Stringer thought she had a speech problem the first time she heard Christine talk about her schedule. Christine was the consummate educator. Nothing was of greater importance to her, and I can give you several examples. During the time that Angie Lee was an assistant for Vivian Stringer, Angie had to take a professional speaking class taught by Christine. And one of the requirements of the class was to speak extemporaneously in front of a large gathering. Well, in 1993, the women's basketball team advanced to the Final Four. And upon returning to campus, a large rally was waiting for them at Carver Hawkeye. Christine thanked all for coming, and before she introduced Vivian, she asked Angie, "Would you please come up and say a few words to your fans?" Angie had no idea this was going to happen. I asked her what she said, and she said, I really can't remember, but I did close with the classic, "Go Hawks." As I was going through the interview process for the Iowa job, and before I made a decision to come, Christine talked with me as if she knew I was not coming. And the thing she did was she advised me to not settle. That was with regard to support, finances, everything, to not settle. All who knew Christine know she did not settle. I came to Iowa because I wanted to know firsthand what it was like to have her as my boss. And I'm so thankful for that decision, and I never regretted it. I did not settle. As a young head coach, my first year at Iowa, I remember walking into her room with a problem within the program. She listened attentively to what I had to share, and when I finished, she said, "And what is your solution?" I hadn't walked in with any solution. So she sent me back out to think about what I felt should be done, and then to come back and see her. I realized right then how much Christine valued all of our ideas regarding the program, And in my opinion, this is what enabled her to build such a powerful department. I never went back into her office again without a solution, and I have shared this lesson over and over again. Throughout the years, Christine and I became very dear friends. At the beginning of each academic year, Christine delivered something that we referred to as the State of the Union Address to the entire women's athletic department, to the staff and to the coaches and our student athletes, and I loved this. My favorite one was her presentation on going from being a young girl to womanhood. What a powerful message for all. I believe you could ask any number of the young women present at that presentation, and they would be able to share their perspective on how this impacted their lives. You know, research shows that the top 3 qualities that employees typically value most in their bosses are encouragement and support, giving praise and valuable feedback, and valuing the opinions of others. The greatest leader I ever worked for was Dr. Christine Grant. She was everything I thought she would be and more. She cared about her entire staff, her administrators, her coaches, her student athletes. Her vision for Iowa women's athletics was crystal clear. Her values aligned with everything that I personally believed in. She always sought our input. And her coaches, well, we were her team. She knew if she hired great people, the rest would take care of itself. She empowered her staff to drive the vision of the program. She collaborated with all, wanting to hear our take on issues and concerns. Even when she was confined to her bed at her home in her last year of her life, and during her time at the Birdhouse, when Diane Thomason, Ann Lawver, and I visited her on numerous occasions, Christine would continue to brainstorm, even then, on building a great celebration of women's athletics for the 50-year anniversary. That's pretty impressive. And so I finished with this quote about roots and wings. There are only 2 lasting bequests we can hope to give to our children. One of these is roots, and the other is wings. For all the young women, staff, and coaches who were fortunate enough to be here during Christine's tenure, our roots were established here at Iowa. We all worked on strengthening those every day. And the wings, they represent what has happened with all of us, with these young women as they entered into their lives following their time at Iowa. Christine's legacy lives on in so many people, in all they have impacted and all they have done. Christine, may we honor you by continuing to be your voice, your model of concern for all. We love you, Christine, and we miss you. Thank you. And now it is my honor to introduce Judy Sweet. Judy was the first woman elected Secretary-Treasurer and President of the NCAA. She began her career in the AIAW and became a key advocate for women's athletics in the NCAA. Judith was a close colleague and friend of Christine's. She was also the first female athletic director to run both the men's and women's programs at UC San Diego. Please join me in welcoming Judy Sweet.
Thank you, Gail. Good afternoon. It's truly an honor to have the opportunity to add to the wonderful comments already shared about Christine. First, my sincere condolences to Christine's family. She always lit up when she spoke of you, and especially when you visited Iowa or she visited across the pond. And to Bonnie and Peg, no one could ask for better friends or a more powerful threesome. And to the coaches and staff who had the privilege to work with Christine, she was so proud of all of you. I've had an opportunity to think about Christine for a long time and the impact that she's had on so many of us, not just in this venue, but throughout the country and across the border and pond. An unlimited list of words came to mind, which kept growing, including many that you have heard from others, but they are worth repeating. I suspect most of us can visualize her with some or all of these descriptives: educator, role model, mentor, leader, advocate, passionate, persistent, vigilant, determined, wise, articulate, focused, strong-willed, professional, committed, supportive, difference maker, value-driven, socially aware and compelled to action, respected, kind, compassionate, confident, adventurous, and more about that later, fun, friend, sister, aunt, our hero, and our North Star. I sense that Christine is listening, a little bit humbled and maybe embarrassed, but smiling down at her many friends gathered today. So these next comments are directed to Christine. Dear Christine, I think of you often and the impact that you have had on my life and that of so many others, most likely in the thousands. I recall sitting in the back of the room early in my career at AIAW conventions and being in awe of your eloquent, passionate, and persuasive speeches. And the same was true when you participated in NCA conventions. I loved seeing you approach the microphone because I knew you would bring the proper perspective to the debates. You were the voice of reason with passion, and you delivered the knockout punch. As a result, I would watch, listen, and learn. That was what I tried to do when I was in your company. I was pleased to get an up-close experience when I served on the board of CCWA, the Council of Collegiate Women Athletic Administrators, which then was changed in name to NACWA, the National Association of Collegiate Women Athletic Administrators, and now is called Women Leaders. You were president in 1987, and I was thrilled to continue that opportunity when I had the honor of serving on various committees with you, fighting for Title IX and participating in NACWA, Alliance of Women Coaches, and various other programs, where the dynamic duo of you and Charlotte West captivated the audience with your history and Title IX presentations. The two of you easily presented together for more than 50 times, and I would sit in the back of the room and watch, listen, and learn. All audiences, coaches, administrators, and students were also spellbound. It was in conjunction with a Title IX hearing in 2003 in downtown San Diego that I saw your adventurous side. After we concluded the morning hearings, I kept asking, "Where's Christine?" You showed up late in the afternoon after venturing solo across the border to Tijuana with your prized purchases in hand and very proud of the bargains you negotiated. When I offered that it's not a very safe thing to do, her response was, "It was lovely." It was extra special for me when you and Bonnie visited my home in San Diego. I have some wonderful photos and memories of the time we shared. While Bonnie quickly understood the dress code of California casual, it took you a few days to break out of your stylish pantsuits. Loved seeing you relaxed. All of this to say how grateful I am for all you've done to enhance my life and that of your many other fans. You have made a difference in so many ways and set the bar high. We all love you. And finally, I know you like to go to performances at the university, so I'd like to paraphrase from the song For Good from the musical Wicked, which captures so well Christine's impact. I've heard it said that people come into our lives for a reason, bringing something we must learn. And we are led to those who help us most to grow. So let me say, so much of us is made of what we learned from you. You'll be with us like a handprint on our hearts. Because we knew you, we have been changed for the better. Thank you, Christine. And now I have the honor of introducing Amy Wilson, the last graduate student of Christine's and one of the best. Amy received her PhD in sports studies from the University of Iowa in 2013 and is currently managing director of inclusion at the NCAA. Whenever I would speak with Christine, she would ask, "How is Amy?" Christine, I can assure you that Amy is carrying on your legacy with the wisdom and passion that she learned from you. Please welcome Amy Wilson.
Thank you, Judy. I appreciate your mentorship and friendship so much. To Christine's family, to Bonnie and Peg, her dearest friends, to Hawkeye Nation, to all who have gathered here today, it is an honor to be with you for this celebration of Dr. Christine Grant's life. I am beyond grateful for this opportunity to pay tribute to her. I believe that I can best use my time today honoring her legacy by talking about Dr. Grant as a professor, mentor, and as the nation's leading expert on Title IX and gender equity in athletics. As Judy noted in her introduction, I am Dr. Grant's last PhD student, a title by which she always introduced me. Attending the University of Iowa to pursue my PhD in the Department of Health and Sports Studies was one of the best decisions of my life. Not only was Dr. Grant an extraordinary professor and mentor, but I also had the opportunity to study with other internationally known scholars, such as Dr. Susan Burrell, Dr. Tina Parrott, Dr. Bonnie Slatton, and I just missed Dr. Burke with her retirement. My educational experience was transformative. Dr. Grant taught us so much that would enable us to be successful in our future professional roles in athletics. She challenged us to develop our philosophy of leadership and our value system. She guided us to understand the importance of consistency. Some find consistency mundane, she told us, but when others believe your actions will always directly reflect your value system, they will follow you. You will all rise together. It was incredible to learn about the history of women in intercollegiate athletics and Title IX from Dr. Grant and my other professors. I became very interested in the history of the Association for Intercollegiate Athletics for Women, or the AIAW, which has been mentioned many times today. This organization, this dynamic, record-setting, historic organization, was founded in 1971, and several at the University of Iowa were intricately involved in not only its formation, but its leadership. The AIW era was very special to Dr. Grant. During this time, remarkable women leaders at the University of Iowa played an important role a critical role in creating participation opportunities and breaking down barriers for girls and women in sport. Dr. Grant and Dr. Peg Burke served as its presidents, and Dr. Bonnie Slatton served in the role of its executive director. This organization's foundational principle was that the purpose of athletics was to enrich the life of the participant. And that is the way Christine lived her life, and that is the way she led in athletics. In one of the many conversations that we had about the AIAW while I was working on my dissertation, Dr. Grant stated, "Throughout history, have women ever been or since organized and led on a national level like they did with the AIAW? I think not." The AIAW leaders organized and led the fight to preserve Title IX's application to athletics when there was a major backlash against the law shortly after it was passed. The great irony of the AIAW story is that while their fight for a strong Title IX succeeded, the AIAW had to close its doors in the early 1980s when the NCAA initiated, and I quote Dr. Grant, "a hostile takeover and began to offer national championships for women that directly competed with the AIAWs." To their credit, many of the AIAW leaders, including Christine, Bonnie, and Peg, regrouped and persisted. They joined NCAA committees and led the charge for change in the male model of sport, change that reflected the AIAW's values. During the AIAW era, Dr. Grant developed lifelong friendships with other prominent and influential women in intercollegiate athletics, leaders like Dr. Charlotte Rust and Judy Sweet, Dr. Sharon Taylor, many who joined Christine and her Iowa teammates to effectuate positive change across intercollegiate athletics over the past 40 years. In the decades following the AIAW and her ongoing leadership of women's athletics at Iowa, Dr. Grant taught thousands of people across the country how Title IX applies to athletics and worked steadfastly to debunk myths about the law. She served as an expert witness on high-profile legal cases. Dr. Grant tracked and analyzed gender equity data for NCAA schools and high schools and presented it all over the country. Her presentations garnered standing room only crowds, packed rooms in which you could hear a pin drop because all were listening intently to every word. They knew they would hear the most current data that depicted the progress and lack thereof for girls and women in athletics. She would show a data slide, perhaps one that captured something like, the number of girls playing high school sports today has still not reached the number of boys competing when Title IX was passed in 1972. And that is a fact. More work to do. After she would share one of these facts, she would follow it in her legendary Scottish brogue. Can you imagine that? Can you believe that? And she would let us all think about it a little before she said, and what are we going to do about it? In 2019, Dr. Grant asked me to update her gender equity data slides for the one final time. Next month, as we commemorate the 50th anniversary of Title IX, I will publish a report that features participation opportunities, allocation of resources, and leadership data for intercollegiate athletics through the lens of both gender and race and ethnicity. Dr. Grant's data. It will be dedicated to her. When I reflect on Dr. Grant's impact on gender equity in athletics, I think of the words of the late Supreme Court Justice Ruth Bader Ginsburg. Fight for the things you care about, but do it in a way that will lead others to join you. We are with you, Dr. Grant. We owe you so much, and we will continue to fight for equity. We honor you today and always. For the remainder of my life, the title that will bring me the most joy and fulfillment, and that will guide my life's work, is being Dr. Grant's last PhD student. Thank you. I now welcome to the stage this afternoon's final speaker, Barbara Burke, who brought more than 25 years of experience in collegiate athletics administration to Iowa when she joined the athletic department in 2016. She currently serves as Iowa's Deputy Athletics Director, Chief Operating Officer, and Senior Woman Administrator.
Thank you, Amy, and thanks to all of you for joining us here today and all of our special guests that came in to honor and celebrate with Dr. Grant. Also, on behalf of President Wilson and Director Barta, I want to say thank you to the Grant family for being here today. Obviously, you've heard so many positive comments and the impact that she has made on so many individuals. Her commitment and her work with regards to Title IX is unparalleled, so please accept our condolences on your loss, and to echo Coach Blevins, thank you for sharing her with us. Just an amazing woman. Without question, I recognize Dr. Grant's legacy, her work, and I stand before you today as a product of her legacy and her work. Without her and others like Peg and Bonnie, Judy, and others that I won't go on to mention today, without them, I know the opportunities just would not be there for women today as they are. So thank you to her and all the other women that have come before. In my current role, I take great responsibility that I have to carry the torch forward. They led to this generation. It's my responsibility to lead that next generation of great women leaders. I want to lead, guide, direct, mentor young women and girls through that next phase of intercollegiate athletics. There are many ways to continue this work, but another passion of Dr. Grant's was education. It was extremely important to her. It's important to us. That's why student athletes come to the University of Iowa, not only to compete, but to go to school, earn a degree, and carry on. That's why today I am thrilled to share with you that planning has already begun in developing and renovating a space within the Carroll Athletics Hall of Fame dedicated to the continuing education of Title IX. The UI, that deserves an applause. Thank you. The UI Athletics Department, UI Campus, and the community are currently working together to develop educational programming and a museum-style exhibit that will be open to the public. This will allow us to continue to celebrate the history of Title IX and UI women's athletics for many, many years to come. Dr. Grant's work will live on. In addition, I'm excited to announce that the Department of Intercollegiate Athletics commissioned a documentary titled Unshakable Belief, the Dr. Christine Grant Story, to be released in August of 2022. In closing today, we are pleased to share a trailer of Unshakable Belief, the very first public showing. At the conclusion of this video today, I would ask that you all rise as the family and guest speakers will exit the arena. The family invites you to join them in Feller Club, which is located in the north entrance lobby here in Carver Hawkeye Arena. Please share with the family in fellowship, reflection, and light refreshments. Again, we can't thank you all enough for joining us today as we honor the life and legacy of Dr. Christine Grant. And now, Unshakable Belief.
I went to my very first football game, and I was blown away. I had never seen anything like that. I thought, wow, this is terrific. Now, what do we have for women? And I got the shock of my life. I was told, in no uncertain terms, women were not interested in sport. Well, I couldn't accept that.
Everybody that knew anything about women's athletics knew Christine Grant.
When she became the women's athletics director at Iowa in 1973 and AIAW was starting to grow, those strong women leaders like Christine Grant and the other AIAW presidents that lobbied for Title IX that fought for it.
And she really brought a coalition of people together and really started a movement.
She was not afraid to stand up in front of a group of men who some scoffed at her and made fun.
I can't imagine some of the battles that she had to undertake.
Because we have nothing to lose and we have absolutely everything to gain.
Christine was the force, a very powerful force leading the charge.
At the forefront of changing intercollegiate athletics on behalf of young girls and women in sports.
The official attendance was announced as 22,157.
Linda and I handed that scrap of paper to Christine and she sees 22,157. And she says, that can't be. That can't be. We can't have that many people in here.
The university was forced to write me a letter of reprimand the next day, which was fine. I framed it.
Yeah, you framed it.
We're really geared toward developing an excellent program. But I don't think we're going to be very satisfied if we're just achieving excellence in athletics.
She was a legend before she was a legend.
We can all feel the effects of what she did.
She just went to bat every single day.
It wouldn't be possible without fighting for this opportunity.
I would describe her as a pioneer.
She was so proud of us as athletes, but she fought so much harder for us as women.
She was fighting, not only here at Iowa, but she was fighting at the Big Ten level, at the NCAA level, and then nationally, in front of Congress to help define what Title IX really meant toward athletics. How did she do it all? I have no idea.
I chose my career because I loved sport. But what gave me the passion to continue to fight for equal opportunities was the unshakable belief that a sport experience can truly empower a woman, perhaps better than any other experience.